and this time I am back as I promised that I would have a video discussing how I gave over my power to the physical pain that I had been dealing with for such a long time. So, to recap, for the last year and a half, I've been going through a process where I've had chronic abdominal pain. Sometimes, it lasts for a few days and I go for a couple of months. And about a year and a half ago, it came back and it was pretty constant, and I started having other difficulties. And so I knew that I needed to empower myself to do that. And this is sort of how I've done that, but some of the things that I have unraveled as I've gone along with it. And if you've seen any of my other videos, one of the things that I talk about is how I gave, or I adopted, I should say, stories that other health professionals had told me, such as, well, you'll be fine if you just lose weight and eat right. And so I had been doing that for myself and really wanting to take care of myself. But I wasn't listening that this pain was not going to go away because of those things. But I told myself stories that I was a busy mom who was going to look after me. In the last video, I said, that I had had problems even going to the bathroom because when your stomach muscles aren't together properly and everything isn't working, your intestine sometimes, your digestion isn't great. So I was embarrassed to talk about the difficulties I was having with that because I figured, while I'm doing what everyone's saying, how come I'm having these problems? So I sort of succumbed to this magical thinking that if I could just deal with my emotions, if I could deal with one aspect of my healing, that, this would all get better. However, and that's nobody's fault but my own. That's, I don't blame anyone for that. That's sort of how I went about doing it. And over time, I became less and less active because of the chronic pain, and the pain, I'd go for long periods without it. But as the years went on, I had less time that was pain free and more time that I had pain. But because I was exercising and I was, doing all of these things, like I learned Qigong and doing a martial art, and I was doing all these things that I thought were good for myself, and they were actually, they have really helped. And I've been told by, medical professionals since I've had these diagnoses, and then I've had surgery in the spring to repair some hernias. And then I just found out not too long ago from a new chiropractor that I went to that I actually had a fractured vertebrae. And I don't know when that happened. And I don't know how it healed, but we saw the x-rays. And then, so now there's are things that we can do about that so that I don't even have to have that pain anymore. So, and the one thing that I have heard is that what I have been doing for myself has been helpful. So that was very empowering. But I wanted to talk about how over the years, because I wasn't listening to my body, that I had, in my head, I had given away my power to these other people and these other thoughts, that I didn't have time, that I'm too embarrassed to talk about this, that I had stopped communicating with people. And it really affected relationships that I had with people over a period of time. It's sort of like I look at myself kind of like, a wounded animal that backs itself into a corner, and then you just don't want anyone to touch you. You don't want to talk to you. You're just like trying to survive. And that's sort of how I felt a lot. I was a very busy mom. I was a single mom for many years. I still am, but my kids are, they're all teenagers and young adults now. So I was very busy. And so I was just trying to rest and recover and then get back out into doing the things that I was doing. And it just got worse because I had given my power over to this pain. And in the last year and a half, I really unraveled how I had to make decisions. And this was something that I had to speak to a surgeon about, was making decisions that, well, if I park, this is one example, if I park at this end of the mall and we have to go here and here, am I going to be able to walk all the way from here and then there and then back and then maybe over there? Or am I going to have to go to the car and drive around to another side so that I'm doing less physical activity? Because if I do all this walking, how am I going to wake up tomorrow? Because it was always that I would feel okay in that moment, that I'm like, wow, I did all this exercise and I did this work, and it's always the next day. And then I would pay for it for days at a time. So it was something I had to start talking about. And I started talking about it initially because when I was going through a healing process with someone I'm working with, that they suggested doing a loving ritual for my abdomen, which was just taking some lotion, rubbing it on my scars and my stretch marks, and telling myself that I loved myself. And that was really important because that really started to show me that I wasn't loving myself. In fact, I was beating myself up because I was having these problems. And even though I thought I was doing all these things, I was still beating myself up that, oh, I should exercise more. And if I do more, I'm going to be better. But I wasn't stopping to hear that I was using that against myself. So I had to really stop that. So that's how it started, was with that loving ritual. And I'll never forget that. That was a wonderful piece of advice and guidance from someone who I adore. And the other thing that sort of sparked that I wasn't the only person who was going through something like this was when I met up with an old friend, and she started, as you do with friends, you start talking about what's been happening in your life, because we were catching up. I hadn't seen her for a number of years. And she started telling me about the trouble she had after she had given birth to her twins, and how much pain she was in, and how she eventually got to the point, unfortunately, where I got to, that you hit physical rock bottom, where you can't even do your job because it's physical. It's hard to look after your children. You're in pain all the time. So she started talking about that, and then the light bulb, really went off, that I went, there are other people who experience this. And so I talked to her about what did she do about it. And it turned out that the pain we were experiencing was very similar, but she had a completely different diagnosis than I did. And that was something that I emphasized in my last video, is that abdominal pain can be very difficult for doctors to diagnose, because 5 people can have the same symptoms but completely different diagnosis. So you really do have to listen to yourself. If you think that something is wrong, you have to advocate for yourself. I mean, I did meet with one surgeon who I knew that we were not compatible, because we did not believe the same things in how the bodies worked. He was a little more old school, I would say, even though he's had years of experience. But I had to empower myself to say, no, this is not a person that I want to work with, and I'm going to keep looking until I find someone who can work with me, who can give me help and answers. And I have really been fortunate in doing that, and in doing that for myself, because I have found some really great people that I've worked with, and I have found out things that I didn't know that I had. But once you do know what you have physically, then you can do something about it. And I think sometimes we're afraid to talk about it. We're afraid to go to the doctor. We don't want the diagnosis because we're so afraid it's going to be something bad. But if you don't know, knowledge is power. So the more knowledge you have about your own body, and the more you take control of that, you can do something about it. You can give yourself more power. You can empower yourself. And that's what I had to see. Was I thought I was empowering myself by listening to one set of stories, when I was actually disempowering myself. And I had to dismantle all of those and look at everything new, and start really listening to what my body was trying to tell me. And I don't ever want to be there again. Since I've had surgery, I feel like a completely different person. You start to realize how physical pain, chronic pain especially, can change your personality. Like I said before, feeling like a wounded animal, and you don't want to talk, and you don't want anyone to touch you. And that can be very common for people. And I think it's hard. It is hard for us to talk about, especially for me, because I just wanted to be this positive person, this positive role model for people. And I think that it empowers people to know that other people go through stuff like this, and that you can come out on the other side. But it takes really listening to yourself and advocating for yourself, which is something that I didn't do. And I had to start communicating. And that's really what I did with my loved ones, and with physicians and people that would listen, is start to communicate. And even with the fracture that I had found just recently in my spine, it's actually, sort of healed itself, but now I know it's there, and I know that there are other things that I can do about it, but I have no idea how long I've had it. It's been quite a few years because of how it's healed. So what I want to try to get across is that don't be afraid. I lived so long in being afraid of, well, what would happen? What would happen to my kids, or what would happen to me, or who's going to look after me? And sometimes I think when we're so wounded, both emotionally and physically, from different things, because we tell ourselves that no one understands, and they're not going to understand, and maybe they're not going to be there for us. And I think that maybe if I had given people a chance, if I had talked to them, maybe there are certain people that it wouldn't have worked if I had talked to them back then. However, I certainly didn't do myself any favors by not speaking about it. I know that I put myself through a lot, and that I have to take responsibility for. And that has been a very emotional ride in the last few years. So when I make this video, it's because I've gotten to a point where I can talk about it. And I'm okay, mostly, talking about it. I still feel sad at what I put myself through, but I also don't beat myself up for it. I know that I was doing the best that I could at the time. And it just, when I make these videos, I've worked through a lot of it, and I'm ready to talk about it. But it isn't something that just was a revelation to me yesterday. This is a process. Any healing is a process. Even after my surgery in the spring, I knew that it was going to take time, and I just listened to what my body needed in any second, any minute, every day, and I did that. So I encourage people to take your healing literally into your own hands. Not that, you should be prescribing yourself a medicine or things like that, but take it and empower yourself to go and find people that can help you and listen to what they have to say. And if something doesn't resonate with you, then by all means, get another opinion, get a second opinion, get a third opinion. That was a really good advice that people gave to me, was that, well, if you don't feel that you're getting the answers, get another opinion. And that's what I kept doing, because I knew that if I could figure out how to physically heal, I could become stronger. And that's another thing that I've stopped telling myself now, is that story about, well, you need to lose weight. Instead, I switched that story around, and I tell myself, get stronger. Get stronger every day. When you get up, what are you going to do today to make yourself stronger? Sometimes that's yoga. Sometimes that's Qigong. I teach Qigong classes now. Sometimes that is a light mace workout. And since my surgery, I've taken it a little steps at a time instead of jumping into everything and going, I can do this. The surgeon's office was great. They're like, well, you don't have any restrictions anymore. Just take it easy, though. Build yourself up to doing things. Don't just jump into stuff. And I said, that's good advice, because that's what I did the first time. This is how I got here, is because I would just get better enough to jump back in and do everything. And that's not good for me. So I had to look at those patterns that I had done to myself, how I just would get better enough so that I could jump right back into looking after my children or doing whatever it was I was doing. So if I leave you with anything, it's every day, wake up, ask yourself, how am I going to make myself stronger today? What am I going to do to empower myself today? Because those are very important. And it is difficult. I'm not even going to lie. When you live with chronic pain, and you have that pain all the time, I know many people that do, it's very difficult to wake up every day and ask yourself, how am I going to empower myself today? Because it's very easy to give your power over to that pain and say, there is nothing that I can do about it. But I'm here to tell you that there's always something that you can do. And I'm not going to tell you what that is, because that is up for everybody else, whatever you're dealing with, to figure out for yourself what's going to work for you. Because what worked for me isn't going to work for you. But all I'm asking is every day, ask yourself, how can I empower myself today? And I'm going to leave you with that for now. Thanks for listening.